Dude, our channel sponsored.
We're sponsored. In fact,
Right.
maybe what I'll do is I'll just like that.
Yeah. Whatever.
How's that?
No, it don't
You like
look.
that?
It looks incomplete. Incomplete.
Special thanks to our friends again at Scranton Road Promotional Marketing. Doing fantastic work. Mike Carswell there, a great guy. We love what he's doing, and we're grateful for their support of this ministry. If you got any promotional needs like swag or gadgets or whatever with your logo and such on it, go reach out to Scranton Road Promotional Marketing. It's not only going to be great stuff, it's going to help the kingdom. They're doing great ministry work in the city. So check it out. Thanks again to them for this. And I know they did a great job, but is it really hard to make this look good?
Hello.
No.
You can't help it. Look
Look at
then
us.
it like goes together. That's what I'm saying. We should go somewhere. They should like send us to like Florida, Hawaii. We look
Like, it's
official.
my Brian shirt.
My Brian shirt.
So while we get you logged in to say hello here today, when
You
I
are
got,
like, you just like stirring up trouble.
I'm not trying to stir up anything.
You're not. Well, if somebody read the title, they would be like.
What's interesting,
what
we
is
got
going on?
a couple of people text us today, one or two, that are like, just I've had it. You guys are talking all about current events now. And I just kind of go, now?
That's like what we do.
Like, I've been doing this for 5 years. I've
What
been
is
talking
it?
about
You say you
current
call
events.
it. We
What?
talk about current events.
We talk about today's issues from a
Today's
biblical
issues.
perspective, not because I'm weird, although I am,
Yes.
but because it's the charge that Moody has given us. We talk about today's issues from a biblical perspective. That's like in our literature as terms of what we're about at Moody. And we do so to help you take that next step in your walk with Christ. And kind of a layer to that, I think it's all that maturity in faith we talk about on a real regular basis that is pointed to in Romans 12:2, which we talk a lot about on this particular show at Moody Radio. And it is that we want God to transform us into new people, not just in a transaction for salvation, but by changing our hearts and changing the way we think, is what Romans 12:2 says.
That's right.
So that's what we do around
What's
here.
up to my people? I'll start with the Team Janelle people. Eva, Angie, Jennifer, what's up? Debbie, she says nice shirts. Everyone saying good morning. Janet, hashtag Team Brian, says looking good. Rob says, Brian, swag, wow. These truly are the last days.
Wow, Rob, you're a hater.
Another hashtag Team Janelle. Monique, what's
Look at
up,
it.
Monique? She likes the shirts. Thank you, thank you.
Again, since it's the first time, you should be able to see that this region right here in the video is our sponsor, Scranton Road Promotional Marketing. Thank you to them very much for their support. And so people are irritated with us about talking about current events, which I find curious, because if we've done this for a long time and they're suddenly upset about it, that must mean something more about them.
Yeah.
And that there's something about whatever the current event is that really tugs at something in their soul, which I'm not mad at them. I think it's good. It shows that it's something worth talking about.
What's up, Marcy on YouTube? We're seeing you, all 5 of y'all, hanging out live here on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe and also leave comments. You can join the discussion as we start the conversation.
So when I got to work today, where's my other article, Janelle? Here it is. When I got to work today, sat down on my computer to get ready for the show. We had something we were going to talk about, but first thing that pops up in my Facebook feed is a live video, Fox 8, and there's comments streaming in. And guys, it's like 4:45 in the morning when I'm looking at this. And there's just comments popping in. People all over Ohio awake, and they're mad. Because it's showing a live video of construction workers carefully figuring out how they're going to remove a large statue of Christopher Columbus that was gifted to the city from Genoa, Italy back in the 1950s. Remove it from its pedestal and place it in storage for now. As part of that story, Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther's office had a public statement said, for many people in our community, the statue represents patriarchy, oppression, and divisiveness that does not represent our great city and will no longer live in the shadow of our ugly past. Now is the right time to replace this statue with artwork that demonstrates our enduring fight to end racism and celebrate the themes of diversity and inclusion. And so they're putting it in storage. And then even the city council was actually careful to, they said, we would also like to express our sincere respect and thanks to the people of our sister city, Genoa, Italy, who gifted this piece in 1955. We will work together to keep the shared spirit of friendship and culture alive as we consider how best to use this historical figure to educate future generations.
Wow, that's such a nice way to handle that decision as we're enlightened and progress in the conversation about history, which we should encourage, right? Like if we grow, you've seen this with family. Like as you learn about history in the past, you gotta acknowledge certain things, make sure that truth is shared, and as you learn, you change, right? You should be open to changing as a family, as an individual, as you learn and grow.
Yes.
And so I like the way, even with that discussion with Italy, like
they're being cautious.
It sounded good.
And what I don't like is when Christians watch as some lawless people who are sinning and evil go and tear down statues in a mob. That's immoral and incorrect. We don't have to talk about that. But what makes me mad is when people look at that and they extrapolate that onto every statue that's being removed. That's unfair and untrue. Because in Columbus, it was a government decision. Just like the government in Mississippi decided to remove the Confederate flag just yesterday. The governor signed it. The legislature decided this no longer represents us and we're removing this. That's a very democratic thing to do from elected people.
Yeah.
You get your city council, your mayor in Columbus. This is not a situation of mob change. This is careful respect of art and removal. And what we want to talk about from a faith perspective is essentially like, what do we do with a guy like Columbus?
Yeah.
Now, what we learned a lot on the show today is that there are the extremes on each side that are very easy. Like statues of Billy Graham, Jesus.
Yeah,
that's easy.
Mother Teresa, no question.
They were great people, with the exception of Jesus. Any negative they did, I mean, he's a great person, but I'm saying he's God, so take him aside. Your Billy Graham, your Mother Teresa, they committed sins like everybody else.
Yes, they did.
But their great deeds far outweigh their evil ones. That's easy. And then you got on the other end of the spectrum, you got your Hitler, Pol Pot, Stalin, Lenin, Caligula, Genghis Khan, all those guys. Their evil deeds so far outweigh anything good they may or may not have done that no one's putting up statues of them. This is easy. If anyone has one, take it down. It's easy. But it's the mushy middle that becomes a challenge.
Yeah.
We got a bunch of comments you have to comment on or not?
Yeah, lots of comments. First, Gary. Oh, so awesome.
I got Gary from Team
Gary, your guy, says, let's go there. Good morning. God bless WCRF and hashtag Young Team Brian and Team Janelle. Yep. Gary said, maybe he's considering. Maybe he's like,
he didn't say he was judicious.
Yeah.
He didn't say old Team Janelle.
Okay.
He held back.
My girl, Theola. Good morning, Theola. Glad you're here. Janet says, yes, she's been listening to you for 5 years, and you've always been about current events, and she appreciates it. Don't change. Hello, Lynn, Brittany. Angie says, the salt of the earth, light set upon a hill. Thank you for speaking on everyday issues. It keeps us informed and helps us to see God's voice on the world today. And as we discuss this, and we say this all the time, we welcome disagreement. So it's not like we're just talking as family. So I love, Angie, that you're saying these are good to talk about. Hold on, because there's people about the statues. Sue says, I'm sorry, I don't know why they're taking it down, the Columbus statue. Please explain again. I look forward to hearing from you.
We'll explain that in just a second.
Do you want me to go on, or do you want to go to explain?
Well, we can start there. Before we get to that, some things I'm thinking biblically in the midst of this. Proverbs 17:15 has been the big one. He who justifies the wicked and he who condemns the righteous are both alike an abomination to the Lord. I don't want to be an abomination. So I think I need, as a Christian, to take the wisdom of this and go, I don't want to justify wickedness or the wicked, and I don't want to condemn righteous. So I think it matters in that light how we view historical figures.
Yeah.
I think it does. I think that is an easy application to that. But also, what's interesting is Dr. Rydelnik texted me just a few minutes ago, and he thought that Isaiah 63:8 is applicable to the statue discussion.
Okay.
I was like, what? You ready for this one?
Okay.
Isaiah 63:8. But I will not destroy them all, says the Lord. For just as good grapes are found among a cluster of bad ones, and some would say, don't throw them all away, some of those grapes are good, so I will not destroy all of Israel, for I still have some true servants there. And as in summary, there's good grapes and bad grapes. Get rid of the bad ones, keep the good ones. That's essentially what that's saying. So what about Columbus? No question, we all know the rhyme. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. It takes a significant measure of courage and ingenuity for a guy to really go all around Europe trying to find someone to sponsor his daring mission. To try to go the other way to get to India. Nobody knew about the Americas. Well, people did, but not in Europe at that time. And so he had to find someone. This Italian guy finally found the monarchs in Spain to sponsor the trip. What are you laughing at?
Veronica, Team Janelle. I'm just saying hi to my people.
So he finally finds the Spanish to sponsor his trip. It's significant amount. You got to be some kind of great salesman to do that.
Yeah, that's good.
I know this is hard for you, but I want to be fair.
No, yeah, but that's good.
And they made it.
Yeah.
There were times in the journey when his guys wanted to turn back, and he wouldn't. That's courage.
Yeah, that's good.
So there's some good. Get your scales out. So here's the quick summary of what I've got here from the Washington Post and Vox. Many of these quotes actually come from Columbus himself or from one of his contemporaries. We'll get to that in just a second. It says, as Columbus and his men approached the islands, the Lucayans, and Columbus wrote, we understood that they had asked us if we had come from heaven. Oh. Then he added, quote, it's from Columbus, with 50 men, they can all be subjugated and made to do what's required of them. His first observations was, oh, that's so nice of you. With about 50 guys, I could subjugate you.
Yeah.
And so he also noticed some of them were wearing gold rings in their noses. So he left some guys on the island, went back, gathered a bunch of stuff, and what happened was they came back, and I'm forwarding through history, skipping a bunch of things. After significantly overselling the prospects for gold to the King and Queen of Spain, Columbus returned to Hispaniola with 17 ships and 1,200 men. And Columbus and his crew had searched and searched for gold to no avail, so what they did is they filled their ships with something else they could sell. People! So of the 500 Taínos, they took, selected because they were the strongest and healthiest specimens, they took them back to Spain. So he's going back and forth a lot. 200 died on the voyage to Spain. 200. Many more died once they had been sold into slavery. And you're like, well, Brian, that's not so bad. Oh, it gets worse. So Columbus tried again for gold, and he couldn't find it. So his men were sick of this. They don't want to look for gold anymore. Right. So here was their new idea. They ordered all the Taínos,
yeah.
age 14 and older, that they have to go find the gold for Columbus and his men, and return with a certain amount of gold dust every 3 months. If they failed to do that, cut off their hands. Yeah, he made them go look for the gold. If they didn't come back with any, and there wasn't much, he'd cut their hands off. And it gets worse. Columbus's men also continued to sexually abuse Taínos women and girls. In 1500, Columbus himself wrote to an acquaintance that, quote, there are many dealers who go about looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 are now in demand. He was overseeing and approving of 9 and 10-year-old native girls captured and sold into sex slavery. 9 and 10-year-old girls. Yeah, Brian, that's kind of bad. Well, there was this guy, Bartolomé
de las Casas.
He arrived in Hispaniola in 1502 when he was 18, and for decades he was part of this group, contemporary of Columbus, in their mistreatment of the native people. But later on, he came to Christ, became a Dominican friar, and wrote something about what he witnessed in an article in 1542 called A Short Account of the Destruction of the Indians. Here is a first-hand account of what happened with Columbus and his men. The Spanish explorers forced their way into native settlements, slaughtering everyone they found there, including small children, old men, pregnant women, and even women who had just given birth. They hacked them to pieces, slicing open their bellies with their swords as though there were so many sheep herded into a pen. They even laid wagers on whether they could slice a man in two with a stroke, or cut an individual's head from his body, or disembowel him with a single blow of their axes. They grabbed suckling infants by their feet and ripping them from their mothers' breasts, dashed them headlong against the rocks. Others, laughing and joking all the while, threw them over their shoulders, shouting, "Wriggle, you little perisher!" This was written by a contemporary who witnessed all of this, Bartolomé de las Casas.
Yeah.
And there's descriptions of him doing similar things to even the Spanish people. After my examination of the history, there is no question Columbus was a wicked, 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 wicked man whose evil deeds far outweigh anything he did with courage. And so, as a Christian, I'm looking at those things, knowing everybody's a sinner, but in this case I'm going, wow, how could I call what is righteous, or, sorry, I don't want to, as Proverbs 17:15 says, justify the wicked. So I would say take it down. What are we hearing from folks?
Janet, she's on your team. She says, I'm starting homeschooling my 14-year-old nephew starting in the fall. I may need a tutor. We're doing faith-based curriculum. Oh my goodness. Monique says, again, oh my goodness, capital letters. A lot of people, including Mike, saying, hearing this for the first time about Columbus. Somebody said it has to go. Monique says that needs to go. Jennifer points out, Jennifer, my girl, so smart. She says he never made it to North America, enslaved and brutally treated people every place he went, all 4 voyages. The Spanish sponsored him to compete with Portugal. Reem is talking to Sue, who was like, well, why does it need to come down? Like, can you please explain?
Which is a good question.
It is a very good question. Reem says Christopher Columbus was a rapist, murderer, and slave owner and traitor. The history of his real deeds are noted in history, but were hidden. And yes, they were, because I never heard them, and a lot of people haven't heard them. Reem says black people have been saying this for years. Amen. This was hidden in schools, and we were not taught the truth. And that's the same for a lot of things, Brian. I think more than statues, we need to be willing to come to a place where we're like evaluating the way history's taught and teaching the whole thing. Whether or not if at the end you celebrate the accomplishments of people, but we have to be willing to admit it hasn't been done and to start doing it.
Yeah, I mean, especially if we're people who believe in objective truth, I think we're doing a disservice to the gospel if we are promoting hiding truth about people and who they were.
Yeah.
We need to be consistent and hold truth. And in fact, Dr. Rydelnik was saying today that one of the reasons he believes the Bible is true is because it included horrible things about David, for example.
Yeah.
Throughout most of history, when you record your own story, you never include those things. It's part of the truth of it, because David was a sinner and is still saved by grace.
Yeah.
It was counted to him as righteousness.
Yeah.
So his faith. And so we've got to be, I think you're right, careful to talk about true things. But you even said earlier today as we were talking that there's this mushy middle. We have the obvious evil and the obvious amazing humans. But there's these people in the middle that we don't quite know what to do with. I think Christopher Columbus was falsely placed too far in the mushy middle.
Oh, yeah.
I look reading those things.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody who does those things ought to be celebrated for anything.
Right.
Whether or not it was common practice.
Mike says, why have these issues not been brought up across the country until now? These statues, named forts and cities, etc., have been in place for over hundreds of years. I think it's because of who controls the narrative and who develops the curriculum and who makes the decisions. Is that right? Or
yeah, I mean, whoever history is written history is written by the victors, and so there's always, you have to acknowledge that it's only part of the story. Even when you read primary documents, people are writing it from their biased perspective.
Somebody even texted and said, I learned about this in college as she was studying to be a teacher, and she was told, like, you can't cover this when you're teaching. You would lose your job. That sounds very intentional. So it's not, oh wait, maybe the colleges didn't teach that, maybe this. It's like, no, it did happen, don't teach that. That's a problem. And where else is it happening?
Well, and this ties to the Mike's question is a good one, and it ties to the overall question of why now. People will go, look, these have been around forever. Why are you so worried about it right now? I don't know if that's Mike's tone or not, but our answer to that is, why not now?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I've been drinking for years. I've been an alcoholic for a long time. Why do I have to worry about it now? Because you realized it's a sin and you repent of it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see, like,
Yeah, that's true.
so it's consistent with Christian life when you discover an area of sin in your life, whether it's you've been drunk or you've been lustful or whatever. When you realize it's wrong, you repent and you stop.
Sandy says, just read an article about the fact that some of the ovens in Auschwitz are still standing and the Jewish people want them to stay so people don't forget. We don't worship the statues, but they are part of history. They should stay.
And Sandy, I really understand your point on that. And I agree with you. I've been to Dachau in Germany, which was more of a work camp than a death camp, but they did still have ovens. I've created a metric in my head because this one is so hard. Like we talked to Dr. Rydelnik and we said, he agreed that some statues should come down and some should stay up. How do you decide? It's hard.
How do you decide? I think you start by inviting diverse voices, which has not been the case. Because when I hear people talking about, well, you know, these are the heroes, I'm like, okay, well, that's subjective. Ask so-and-so. And not that anybody's right. I'm saying as you have a diverse voice, not everybody will agree with a decision, but at least you'll look at it from different perspectives.
Yeah, and you brought up the importance of defending the oppressed and speaking up for the oppressed.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly in line with that. But I do think, Sandy, that there's a distinct difference and an important difference between the purpose and goal of Auschwitz and the purpose and goal of a statue of Columbus. And I don't, everybody can make up their own distinctions, but here's what I would say. The clear purpose of Auschwitz is a cautionary tale. It was left up as a reminder of evil that was perpetrated. And it's there, and Jewish people want it to stay there so that it will never be forgotten. Dr. Rydelnik's been there. His family perished there. He would never advocate for it to be torn down, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between that and a statue of Christopher Columbus in front of City Hall in Ohio.
In a city that's named after him.
And that is literally on a pedestal. And when you place someone on a pedestal, figuratively or literally, it's a place of honor. Auschwitz is not honoring the Nazis' behavior.
Right.
It's dishonoring it, but remembering it. I think we can take those statues of like Christopher Columbus and we can move them somewhere. Don't destroy it, don't wreck it. But why do we place wickedness on a pedestal? As Michael talked about in Isaiah 68, there's good grapes and bad grapes. Keep the good ones, throw out the bad ones.
Monique, Team Janelle, what's up? She says the only way to make an intelligent assessment or decision about anything, we must have all the facts. Sue says, I never knew. I was never taught all about Columbus. So rewriting history is not just about recent times in schools and books. It was long ago. Wow. I hope this will be included in school curriculums along with other hidden truths. On the other hand, I hope they will stop erasing all the good and blessings that Christians were in history. But even for some Christians, I know we're believers here, but it hurts to say, there's even some stuff that Christian, isn't he Christian? What didn't he do it in the name of Christianity? A lot of the stuff he did. Or a lot of stuff was done. I'm a believer and it hurts me, but there's a lot of negative stuff that even as believers we got to acknowledge in our history.
Of course.
Gary says, after hearing about Columbus, and Gary's Team Brian, after hearing about Columbus, it's hard to celebrate Columbus Day. It's sad we weren't taught this in our younger years. I'm sure there's others that we haven't been told about. Of their evil ways. Exactly. Sara from Ecuador says, one thing I was taught in college was to go to primary sources. That's right. As Brian did by citing an eyewitness to Columbus's acts. That's a good point. It requires hard work, but it is a good practice.
But it's also, you're right, Sarah, but it's also important to remember that even primary sources are biased.
That's true. But they're better than now. You don't think? It's easier to rewrite now.
We look at people's observation of events. You could have an event here in the U.S., in Columbus, and you could have two different people write two different stories.
Oh, yeah.
So we do have to acknowledge that it's possible that Bartolome
de las Casas
had some biases of his own.
With the accent and everything. He did, exactly. Just like we all do.
Since he participated in it, I don't have any doubt. Why would he share that? unless it were true.
Yeah.
But anyway, we can walk down that road, I guess. But there are harder ones, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. I think Columbus is far closer to the area of wickedness than we want it to be.
Yeah.
And we have to grapple with that reality. But our culture will have to deal with even harder things. I'm not ready to change the name of the city of Columbus.
Yeah, no. I want to sit with.
And why is that different?
Because of people like you. They're not ready. And it's a big deal for a lot of people. So I'm willing to say, okay, fine, let's not do that. Let's talk about history and telling the whole story. Let's talk about inviting diverse voices to make decisions about what we call things, about what should be included in education. Let's talk about telling the whole story about those who the majority call heroes. Let's bring in voices to talk about stuff. I would rather sit there than about statues and cities, because that's how you change hearts and perspectives. A statue taking it down isn't going to do anything to a person that still celebrates somebody like Columbus. Ken on YouTube says, hi Ken, says American education sort of morphed out of a classical European perspective, which tells a heroic epic of the explorer era. I think it's reasonable to rethink how we teach them.
Especially when you look at the Americas, how the conquistadors
they were all messed up.
And the things they did to native people, the Aztecs, the Mayas, the Incas.
Oh, it's atrocious.
But it really is portrayed in Western culture as, and this is hard to grapple with, but conquering the heathens.
Yeah.
And helping those lowly, subhuman things.
Yeah.
Which is much of how when Africa was colonized, was the attitude of let's civilize the savages.
And that's where I guess as believers we should try to enter into these conversations. It's like Ron said on the show when somebody called and was like, well, we got to be thankful that Columbus discovered America because we wouldn't be here. And Ron said, well, I bet you the natives wouldn't be thinking that. Like this was their home. They had their culture. And and as a believer, do you have to have, you do, but I'm saying, do you have to have the minority speaking in, whether it's blacks or natives, speaking into a decision, or can we do it? Can we make some of these decisions, whether it's curriculum or statues or anything, or acknowledging the evils of our favorite heroes? Do we have to have a minority speaking into it, or are we capable of doing it ourselves?
I think it's
You're
better.
doing it, and what makes you willing to say, I can take my favorite hero and go there, even as a teacher?
I think it's honestly Christ in me that does that. Why? Because if I'm a Christian, the last thing I want to do is start to paint a picture of somebody as being sinless, or like I get irritated by the George Washington cherry tree story. I cannot tell a lie. Please. We've turned him into like a Jesus figure, and that's blasphemous and ridiculous. My faith in Christ and my need for a Savior drives me to understand my need for one, and therefore the sinful nature of humanity. And so I ought to be the one in the forefront, willing to examine sin.
Yeah.
And to talk about the value of works or not.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Somebody's here. Catherine. Hi, Catherine. She says, pure evil behavior, as we looked at Christopher Columbus. She says, okay, we can recognize what Columbus did. We need to know the truth of his behavior, the good and the bad. The truth is important. In consideration of his behavior, why would we want to honor Columbus? I don't. I believe there's too much evil behavior committed by this man. I feel no desire to honor him. Thank you for revealing this information. I had no idea.
Yeah, and I only scratched the surface of stuff he did. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, they fed babies to dogs, his men.
Babies to dogs. Wow. Jennifer says, this whole discussion is exactly why classical literature is so important, to see history from different views in different times and different cultures. When schools remove excellent classic literature, they're only teaching what someone decided was historically significant. feeding school children biased information. Do you agree as a teacher?
Yeah, and to be honest, I have a whole different view on what to do with controversial literature that has racist ideology in it versus a statue honoring someone who did stuff like that. Those are two totally different discussions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Two totally different discussions.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to do is start getting rid of Huckleberry Finn because it's got the N-word in it.
Right. No, I wouldn't.
But part of that is because the way those are taught is you can actually use those as a means to talk about those issues.
Right.
A statue is not a means to teach anything. It's designed to honor.
Right. Rob brought up something I've never heard of. He says, look up the reason why we celebrate Columbus Day in October. The result of our relationship with Italy after a group of Italians were murdered by a mob in New Orleans. Have you heard that?
No, I don't know about that. I'll have to look it up. Thanks, Rob. I don't know.
Gary, Team Brian, says, on a happy note, Janelle, don't count your eggs before they're stacked. Remember?
Yeah.
Your joke. Hope. Hi, Hope. She says, my sister went to middle school in Alabama after living in Ohio, and the textbooks do not depict history the same in Alabama versus up here, up north.
One of my projects in my undergraduate degree was a historiography class. It's the study of history.
Yeah.
Which is awkward, and it sounded horrible, but it was interesting. One of my projects was I researched the depiction of African Americans during Reconstruction over time in textbooks.
Yeah.
So I looked at what did textbooks say in the archives right after Reconstruction and how they depicted African American people. And for those who don't know, Reconstruction is the period immediately following the Civil War in the South. And I followed it all the way up to the 90s. And one of the things I discovered is that there was one textbook that was using racist terminology and derogatory terminology for African Americans far after it was socially acceptable to do so. And so what we're finding is the authors clearly had a bias and some racial issues to deal with of a textbook.
Wow.
So these are things this is why I always tell people history is the most controversial subject to teach in any school.
Jennifer says, yes, Brian, it was important to see my children cringe at those moments in Tom Sawyer and open discussion about seeing the world from a different perspective. Yeah. And even, I don't see this a lot, and that's a whole, but as we talk about Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, mainstream education, reading literature from a diverse group of authors, because I didn't do that, and literature is springs out of a context of history and life experience, in the way that somebody like you, a white boy, would understand Black America if you read more. No, when you were a boy. Oh. If you read more, I wouldn't call you a boy. Read more from African American authors or Native authors or Hispanic authors, Latin.
Yeah, and that's been happening in education for quite a while, but
it's like special, like on Black History Month, or it's not like part of mainstream education.
Agreed. Agreed. So, yeah.
I want to say hi to George. He's chiming in. That's the way he said it. For the first time on YouTube. Hey, welcome, George.
What's up, George
Allen. So glad to have you here. And so the conversation can continue. Keep commenting.
Just don't be someone who won't deal with nuance. Like, it drives me nuts when people will go, this Columbus statue, people just tearing down statues and burning books. Stop it.
Or the opposite. They need to all come down. Everybody, yeah.
Stop it. That's not what's happening.
Yeah.
That's not the discussion. Be a legitimate, honest, truthful part of it so that we can all be a part of Proverbs 17:15 so we are not justifying the wicked or condemning the righteous. Have a real discussion. No one's saying burn books. We're talking about a statue being democratically removed from a pedestal.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Not tearing it down, nothing. That's the discussion. And that's worth having. By the way, Scranton Road Promotional Ministries, you see their logo here. Thank you to them. Again, they are a division of Scranton Road Ministries. They provide promotional products for your church, your business, your organization, and they invest in the city and in the kingdom. And if you want to do that, because they do both, go to scrantonroadministries.org or scrantonroadpromo.org for more information. And thanks to them for our swag and for supporting Brian and Janelle Overtime. Again, you got any kind of gear you need printed up with your logo and all that, go to Scranton Road Promotional Marketing.
And Jennifer, somebody is talking about curriculum. Jennifer, you use Charlotte Mason curriculum. I love Charlotte Mason. She's amazing. Angie says, have a great day. She loved the discussion, interesting and refreshing. And Rob says, you're going to love this. Again, you two rock, and we look really good in the shirts. Rob, we know I'm your favorite. So, okay,
Wrong.
Let's go. Bye.
We're going to actually zoom in on Brian so that you can't see Janelle. All right, everyone.
Bye, guys.